Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit-Down. It's been a busy week at the theater this week for me, getting to see a bunch of things, and the first movie that we're going to talk about is one I was super excited about. Super pumped. High bar, man. Lots of hype. The anticipation, anytime one of these types of movies comes out, I'm always getting hype. I'm not going to consider myself a diehard, but I do love these movies. So pull up a chair, man, take a seat. We are going to rip through, spoiler-free, everything we can about the Crimes of Grindewald. And that's right, Grindewald. That's how his name is used in the movie. And the minute they say it that way, I was like, I can't go back. It's so much cooler. So Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindewald. Not a bad Wizarding World movie. And I have a feeling by the time we see Fantastic Beasts 3, we're going to say that 2 was important in setting up that movie. And I think that's where the problem really it begins to stem from, man. This movie, for me, turned into something that I would equate to like episode 7 and 8 during Game of Thrones, when you have a lot of story and build-up stuff that you have to lay down before you can get to that massive episode 9 that we get every year from them. That's kind of what this movie felt like. It felt like it had a lot of legwork to do to get us to Fantastic Beasts 3, and because of that, it has some problems. For instance, a lot of our storylines are spread really, really thin. We don't ever really dive all the way into any of the storylines that we kind of want to dive into because there are so many. I love J.K. Rowling, man. She's the queen, right? Like she has created this massive universe and an entire empire on the back of Harry Potter in this Wizarding World. And it's fascinating. Every time that there's a Wizarding World movie, I'm never not gonna like it because the world is wonderful. But I don't think Rowling is a great screenplay writer. And a lot of the issues that I think she's having stem from the fact that her mind is calibrated to write novels. And there's a lot of exposition in this movie, and it's a lot of tell, not show, and that works in a book because all you got are words. But on the movie side, you kind of want to show things more than you're telling us things. And unfortunately, this one we get a lot of exposition and we get just a lot of stuff. And there's just so much going on that it ultimately, I think, hurts the movie. But it's a mixed bag. I think there are good things in this movie and there are some bad things in this movie. And like I said, the storylines being spread out as much as they are, on top of not just telling the story that we're kind of telling that's focused around Credence, but we have like all these different love stories going on. I mean, we've got Dumbledore and Grindelwald, we've got Newt and Tina, Bunty, who is like Newt's new assistant. She's got a crush that's very clear on Newt. Newt and Lita and Theseus, Jacob and Queenie, Credence and Nagini. There's a lot of, pairs in this movie and a lot of these stories that we don't really ever get to spend too much time on. And it's really unfortunate because it does ultimately, by the time we get to the end, and there's a major twist thrown right in there that literally felt like it was thrown in, man. There are no breadcrumbs or anything that kind of lead you to go, oh, I saw that coming. It was a, oh, what? And just based off of that, albeit thrown in there, it's now canon, that with what we got in this movie, I think is setting up something else. This is kind of one of those, get me through to get to the next movie, which I always think is unfortunate, but what could be building in that Fantastic Beasts 3 could be huge, and then we might look back and go, all right, I get why we had to do what we did in Fantastic Beasts 3. But the one cool thing about all of the stuff that's thrown at us, I think it's the first time since, JK started these Fantastic Beasts stories that we can kind of see the beginnings of the road that will lead us to Harry Potter. And that I thought was pretty cool. The other thing that's really cool in this movie is David Yates. He figured something new out, man. I mean, he's done, I think, the last 5 or 6 movies in the Wizarding World, including this one. And this is his most cinematic of all of them. The opening sequence of this movie is so freaking good that it was like kind of crushing to never get back to that peak. When the peak starts up here at the beginning of the movie and the movie never gets back to that, that's pretty disappointing. But that opening sequence just set the plate for the beginnings of the cinematography and the cinematic experience we were going to get in this movie. David Yates, I don't know what he did, but this movie is so cinematic. Every scene, you're just totally invested with what you are watching because of the world that's being built around you. I love going back to Hogwarts, and the Hogwarts stuff is really, really good. We get to see some throwback Dumbledore as a teacher moments. We get to see a young Newt and a young Lita. Things like that, and those sequences work really, really well. It's JK's wheelhouse. She loves that area. And those scenes pop really nicely. But everything that Yates had to work with in this movie, he turned really, really cinematic, and I love that. If you had a story to match what we did cinematically, we'd have a really big Wizarding World movie on our hands. Okay, so writing and directing aside, and the fact that a lot of these storylines are spread really thin, I want to get into the characters, man, because there's good stuff in here that just doesn't get brought all the way to where we have to go. And we'll start with Albus Dumbledore and good old Grindewald. And the Dumbledore Grindelwald stuff, it's in there. You definitely learn things. Like, we definitely know why Dumbledore cannot move on Grindelwald. And we get to see some stuff, but we never really fully dive into that relationship and dive into all the things that kind of keep Dumbledore for, being ashamed of the fact that he can't make a move on Grindelwald. And it feels like the little bit of stuff that we got there is building to something that should have a lot of stuff happening with the two of them in 3, which is just unfortunate because they're both really good when they're on screen. I mean, Jude Law is so charismatic. It's so easy to love him when he's on screen. And Johnny Depp, say what you will about, Johnny in his personal life, it seems like he's kind of at least writing himself. However you tend to look at Johnny Depp, by all means, that's your opinion. But for him personally, it seems like he's kind of getting his life straightened out. And it's reflective back in his movie work where he's kind of back on a level of what I'm familiar with from Johnny Depp. And he is really good as Grindelwald, man. He delivers a terrifying, Hitler-esque type of villain, right? And it's a lot of speaking for him. And that's one of the other things that kind of drove me nuts. Like, the Crimes of Grindewald, we don't really get to see too many crimes being committed by Grindelwald. We do get to see one that, just kind of epitomizes how bad he is. But it's a lot of exposition with Grindelwald, too. And Depp looks so cool, and that opening sequence was just so perfect. But again, it just makes me get more anticipated for the next one, because if we dive into that story, I'm really, really interested. Then, of course, we got our original crew. Newt Scamander, Tina Goldstein, Jacob Kowalski, and Queenie Goldstein. And we get to spend time with all those characters, and a little bit more with this group than everybody else. And I love this group so much. The Jacob and Queenie stuff I thought was really good. I thought we got to dive into some stuff without having to dive in too deep, but be able to figure out exactly where their relationship is, what's going on with them. And I love their introduction back into the world and how Jacob has been brought back into the Wizarding world after the end of the first one. I thought all that stuff worked with them really well. However, the end of their story, I just sat there and was scratching my head because I was like, this seems so out of character for one of the two of them. But that was probably the story I enjoyed the most because it got the most flushed out for the little bit of story that it had. However, Newt and Tina, oh man, it's just so, like, you just wanted to get the two of them back together, and there's all this nonsense that's kind of built in there because of things Newt did or didn't do. But when they are together, they're so good. It's just so very limited. Tina gets so little to do in this movie, as does the entire Ministry of Magic. And I wanted to go back there because, there's a bit where Newt has to get kind of like a visa or his passport, and it gets kind of denied. And he's at the Ministry, and the Ministry looks really awesome. Looks like a place I'd like to spend some time. And Tina is so good that I wish we could have just spent more time with her than all of the extras that are at the Ministry, including Newt's brother, Theseus Scamander, and Lita Lestrange. And that brings in more of this complicated love story where, like, Lita's high school crush love interest was Newt, but she's marrying Newt's brother. And it's all that stuff stuff is just like, I'm like, can we declutter that and get into the characters? Because Lita Lestrange's stuff is really interesting. I think Zoe Kravitz did a really good job with her, and she gets this one really cool moment when she's referring to her family tree that's just really cool. That's what I mean. There are some really cool things in this movie, but again, that storyline kind of spread thin, and it makes you wonder why, like, all these women are after Newt. I mean, even his assistant Bunty kind of has a crush on him. But the one thing that was cool with Newt, for Newt, was his new. I don't like. It's not a lab. It's where. When he would go into his suitcase, the place where he's storing all of the creatures, he has a new one that's massive. It's like a bunch of different floors, and we get this really cool sequence with a water beast that I was just like, wow, that's awesome. And as a Fantastic Beasts fan, I love seeing that. And then there's one other beast that's kind of Chinese related, that's kind of lion sort of. So cool, visually stunning. He has 2 scenes, and the second one, man, just watch his tail. But the stuff with him just so cool, and again, gives you some moments for Newt and Tina that like brought you back to the first one. You're like, oh, I love that stuff. I just wish we could stay there more. Now, on top of all of those, we also have Credence and Nagini, and Ezra Miller and Claudia Kim do a really good job. But again, very little, which is strange because the story is really centered around Credence's story, and where it goes is like really important, but we get to spend so little time. And I really wanted to spend more time with Ezra Miller and Claudia Kim. And Claudia Kim, poor girl, man, like so little screen time as it was, and then had like almost no lines in the entire movie. But every time she was on screen, I was absolutely fascinated with her. So it was so frustrating to have all these things going on, and it's like, oh, well, can we play over? Oh, no, now we gotta go play over here. Well, I want to go back over here. And it felt, like I said, that the storylines were a little too thin, and although everybody shows up and does a great job, I don't think anybody really had, like, anything that was major in standout fashion after that opening sequence. And the end action sequence is pretty stellar as far as visual effects go. The kind of showdown that we get and the way it's worked, I thought was really cool. It brought a Wizarding World cameo into the world, not an acting cameo, but the character cameo, where he shows up. And I was like, oh, that was cool to see him, and I like that. And what we learned, by the end of the movie, the last part of the movie ended strong outside of the fact that the twist just didn't make sense for me. But visually, again, really, really captivating. There was one other major problem I had in this movie, and it's the fact that Minerva McGonagall shows up in a flashback in a time when Minerva McGonagall is not yet born. JK has been really quiet. It'd probably be smart to say something like this is a family member or not, but like, it just completely throws the timeline off if it's actually Minerva McGonagall. So I don't know what that was about. It was like cool to see her, but it made no sense. And that's what I mean. Like the story and the screenplay, there's just so many things where you're like, oh God, I hope that Warner Brothers can kind of approach JK and like, look, we love your stories, but can we bring somebody in here that can maybe help tighten these things up and make it work a little bit better on the screen? Because there certainly was a lot to dive into, but I don't think this is necessarily a problem that's going to continue to exist in every single one of these. Again, there was a lot of legwork on top of telling and getting into all of these different stories real quickly. We had a lot going on in the Wizarding World, and all that setup, I think, is leading to something big. And if the big thing pays off, I can forgive this movie. But it is probably the worst of any of the movies in the Wizarding World. However, as a Wizarding World fan, I still enjoyed the movie. Just far lower delivery than I expected it to be. So there you go, man. That's everything the Seaman's got to say about the Crimes of Grindelwald. Now it's your turn. Have you seen the movie? Are you a diehard Harry Potter fan? Am I out of line? Anything I say crazy? Like I said, I follow and I love the series, but some of you diehards probably have better insights than I do. So hit those comments down below. Try to keep it spoiler-free, and if you have any, mark them. But let me know what you're thinking. Did you like the movie, where it's going, what it's building? Did you kind of feel like this was hey, we got to make this movie to get us to the next place? Let me know all that down below. As always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe and little bell so you get alerts every time I make a new video. For the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down, I'm the Seaman, and I'm signing off. Peace. Hey, still here, guys. Well, so is the Seaman, and I'm here to remind you that the fun doesn't have to stop. You can keep it going with just a couple clicks of a button. So make sure you check out videos either here or here. And if you're new and haven't done it yet, please hit that subscribe button over here.